Okay, I want to welcome you to Media Growth webinar. We're having a webinar here on virtual events and strategies for adapting to the coronavirus. Everyone has been challenged greatly from that. So we have three great speakers who are going to be talking to us about how to adapt to these changes. And you can go ahead and post your questions on the social app throughout the event. We'll be talking, you want to do it on the executive forum of your app. So just to let you know, of course, the Media Growth Summit, like everybody in the industry, has changed their dates. They're going to be October 12 to 14. And our speakers who were lined up for have graciously agreed to do it again in October. So we'll have a great presentation and a great agenda. And of course, it will adapt to the changes that are happening in our industry since everything's changing every 5 minutes. We're grateful to Socio, who has provided the technology and the power, his power in this webinar. And their app we're using their app to be able to network and to be able to share ideas with each other. And the app will be available, from this day in the webinar all the way through to the event in October and afterwards as well. So I wanted to introduce each of our presenters. They're all three excellent B2B media executives. George Fox, I've known for many years. He did a great job at Cygnus and in his own business at American Business Media. He is now Chief Executive Officer and partner at Allired Business Media, which offers a portfolio of magazines, digital media brands, trade shows, and conferences serving marketing executives, business owners, and scientists in the global cosmetics, fragrance, flavors, and skincare businesses. He will present first, and then the second presenter will be Mariah. She is Director of Content Services at Staymates Business Media, which is an excellent company in business for 90 years and done a great job for all these years, as well as adapting to the new environment. They serve the media planners, commercial interior designers, and building owners. Mariah provides strategic, editorial, and management support for 3 established digital and print publishing brands, as well as higher education, content marketing, and content strategy. And our third speaker is Paul Turboff, who has done an excellent job for many years over at Hanley Wood. He is president of the Residential Construction Group at Hanley Wood, a B2B media, data, and marketing company serving the construction industry. Paul manages Hanley Wood's flagship builder and 5 other leading brands that are fully integrated across event, digital, and print platforms. So George, I'm going to turn it over to you to do the presentation.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. I wanted to cover some of the helpful hints that Allired has been already adopting and putting into place as we're looking at what's happening with what we all are referring to as the new normal. Just some of the things that we look at is always to, get out in advance on deadlines when we're looking at our events anyways, but given what's happening and trying to stay in pace with what's, what we're being told from the CDC as well as others, we're trying to make sure that we're giving everyone in our served communities the time they need to be able to prepare, make changes, and confirm what they need to do to take care of their businesses so that they can continue to participate in any kind of special programs that we're doing with any of our conferences, our trade shows, and our special events. One of the first things that we did as a business was to get our continuity plan together so that we'd be prepared to support our events remotely at full capacity. That sounds more complicated than really that it is. But again, I credit my events team at Allired because I tell them constantly that they make things look easy. But the truth of the matter is that by early coordination with all of your vendor partners in supporting your events, you can put these actions into place relatively straightforwardly. The other thing that we talk about is building communication and operation plans that are ready to go at a moment's notice. When these events need to be changed, you need to be ready to do it. And more importantly, not only do you need to be ready internally, you need to be ready externally, because people will have questions, there will be concerns and fears. And so one of the main things that we're focused on is trying to be anticipating enough of this so that we can try to reduce the stress levels as much as possible. Some of the things that we've been talking about is, anticipate, prep all systems so you have operational backup plans before you even need them, so that you're ready to go if you're looking at possible new dates, and you try to work this across with all of the parties that you work with. Um, Other things that we've been looking at and we're still confirming with all of our partners is trying to get modules set up within the systems themselves that support registration and the exhibitors, so that this is an efficient process for them to reconfirm their participation with the new dates and still continue forward with the event. Trying not to make it like you have to literally walk out and then come back in to set yourself back up, either as a registered attendee, whether it's an education program, whether it's a special session, or whether it's something an exhibitor might be sponsoring or some special thing they're doing. We're trying to work this thing through. So it's almost just like change the dates and you just confirm your participation. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm just going to say it again because it is really the critical aspect of the whole thing, and that is prepping that communication. Do it now. Get it ready now so that you're ready and you can mobilize it at a moment's notice, because it's critical. And I mean, for all of us in the events business, the phones have been ringing steadily with people asking questions and wanting to know what's happening. So you want to have as much clear, concise communication available to them on a broad level so that it reduces the amount of call volume that you're going to be getting. Actions we've taken to date. One of our larger events was scheduled in early June, and it was within short order of the start of March that it appeared that that was just not going to work. And so we've already moved that event from early June now into mid-December. And happy to report that most have come along and have felt very good about the changes that we've made. Again, I think we're all still wondering what the time frame is, given our new normal that we're all living in. We've also been surveying our customers. We want to understand what's happening with them, and we want to try to be as responsive as possible to them, given what's happening. So we're in the process of doing that. And then, of course, taking all of the necessary actions to support both our team and our customers has been one of our top priorities at Alured. And we've had several things that we've done. Our office has already gone remote. We went remote before mid-March to be prepared for what we felt was coming. And we've been working through the same process for our customers and our partners so that we're at 100% capacity, even though no one's in our office anymore at this point. So those are the things that we've been doing at Alured. So I'll turn it back over to you, Kathy, to introduce the next speakers. And I'd just like to say thank you for everyone for tuning in today.
George, thank you so much for presenting us today. So can you tell us a little bit more about how how some of your sponsors and attendees have responded to you changing your event from June to December? How many of your sponsors stayed with you? How many of your attendees stayed with you? How many speakers stayed with you?
To date, all of our sponsors have stayed with us. Again, this is still unrolling and unfolding, as we all know. It's hard to really put, your finger on it to really know, but to date, we have 100% retention. And on the side, there was only a few people, and it was really more of a schedule conflict with the week that we chose in December, and it was only about 2 or 3 attendees that actually backed out. Several called and were concerned with the dates, but still at this point have not canceled just yet. So it's been, I would say at this point, smooth.
Great, great, great. So how are you going to change your agenda as you go forward? I mean, obviously you've got quite a bit of time until December So are you working on changing that, or do all your speakers stay with you? And how are they going to change their presentations to make it more relevant as we go on, as things evolve until December?
Well, the technical nature of this conference, Kathy, doesn't really, I mean, the coronavirus clearly is going to impact all of us in some shape or form, but overall, the content of what's being presented at this conference is technically and driven and very scientific in nature. So it really doesn't directly have an impact on what they might do. I'm sure there will be some references to it, but for the most part, it's pretty much going to be the same event because this event's every other year. So a lot of filed over the last 2 years, and there's a lot of new data that a lot of these presenters plan to, provide to everyone during the course of our 3-day event.
Right. Okay. That's good. That's good. So, what has been the reaction from your advertisers to this coronavirus? Are you still able to keep the advertisers for your print data services?
Again, I mean, to date, yes, it's been very effective and very efficient thus far. One of the things that we did early on was communicate with all of our customers that we are still at 100% capacity. We're functioning remotely. We've communicated 3 or 4 times already with them. We've gotten a lot of good response, from our customers through all of our normal channels. Our team has just done an absolute awesome job with everything that we've needed to do. And we're just continuing to stay focused on what's occurring and, trying to anticipate, as I mentioned to everyone else, so that we're out in front of it. Like we have events that are coming up this summer, and we already have dates that we're looking at, well in advance. If we're feeling that the CDC and some of the news that we're hearing is not, going to be good for us to hold those dates, then we're already ready to start looking at new dates for those other events.
That's great. So you're really planning ahead, and it sounds like your business is going well despite what's happening in the industry. So congratulations for you to be able to keep your advertisers and your speakers and your sponsors. That's terrific.
Appreciate that, Kathy.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed because a lot of people, are really, really struggling. So it's great that you've been able. It shows your great reputation and what you've done. I know when we talked, when I was in Chicago, you did a great job of managing your staff, and that really helps because, and still in B2B media, our greatest assets go home at night. So that's great. So, great example at your business media, how things are being managed in these crazy times. And thanks so much, George. We really appreciate your input.
You're very welcome.
Great. So our next speaker is Mariah from Stay-Based Business Media. Like I said, this is another company that has done a great job in adapting to the things that are happening in our industry. And so I asked Mariah to speak as well. Go ahead, Mariah.
Thank you for the opportunity. So just quickly about StayMates, wanted to just very briefly touch on what makes us maybe a little bit unusual in the world of publishing. So our group runs 3 different publications and 3 different websites. You might have heard of some of these depending on the organization you work for: Buildings, Meetings Today, and Interiors and Sources. But for over 60 years, we've also been a higher ed and healthcare marketing agency. So we run both our publication and our agency side, covering several 100,000 viewers. We have a lot of contact with advertisers. We have a lot of contact with individuals like yourselves who are working in these specific fields, and partnerships with other agencies that also deliver work for these clients. So as you can imagine, in our world, we had 2 different approaches to how we had to go forward with COVID-19 and all of the various chaos that has come along with that. So we did our best to serve as a controlled voice, an empathetic partner, and more of a collaborator than a do this, do that sort of approach that we typically might take in an agency. So when we started working through our response strategy, we looked, just like all of you did, at how are we going to help people who rely on us for advertising? How are we going to help people that rely on us for their daily content marketing needs, blogging, website content, website support, and how are we going to respond to our own internal employees. So what we did was form a team, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we really relied strongly on our corporate marketing team. And so all of our publishing entities really gathered together and rallied around how can we create specific messages that will be both agnostic across all of our audience's needs, but also tailorable, if that is now a word, to be able to reach all of our specific audiences and our influencers in these ways. Really what we came down to was we needed to come across as empathetic. We needed to lead with emotion. What are our audiences feeling? What is their pain point week to week? And as we go through these examples, we'll talk about what we're now referring to as COVID time. So what happened last week is vastly different from what's happening this week in people's minds. And what's happening this week will be very different from what they're experiencing next week as all of this news plays out, just like George alluded to before. The really striking point that all of our brands and all of our agency clients need for us to push home to them in very subtle ways is that our behavior now influences our future relationships together down the road. So let's start really by looking through some of the publisher pieces that made the biggest splashes for us. I'm sure some of you on the line, maybe all of you know who Michael Dominguez is. He's a very influential individual in the meetings and events industry. This individual published a story on his personal LinkedIn page, and because we have a great relationship with Michael and he does a regular column for us, we were able to say, hey, Michael, do you mind if we also share your content out on our site? We did, and this thing just really took off because it was coming through our channels to a very targeted audience. His story got into the hands of people who might not have seen it on LinkedIn. So overall, from our site, this piece gathered about 20,000 shares on social media. Let me just go back to that piece really quickly. We also included this out into our newswires via email and on social media. One really important thing about stories like this is because, just like Kathy mentioned and George mentioned, this situation is changing minute by minute, day by day, week to week. So it's important, if you're going to put out information that lists statistics or that lists recommendations, that you make sure they're absolutely correct on a viral story like this. You have to go back and make editor's notes. As you can see on our screen there, we did. We put in, this was originally published elsewhere. We have updated it on such and such date, just so that the reader knows what they're reading is current and not something that was a flash in the pan a week ago. During the time that all of this was breaking out, all of our editors were actually at an offsite retreat working towards our 2021 goals for our content team. So it was really a crazy time. We had all of these big ambitions for our own teams going on at the same time as we were trying to handle all of these meetings, and everybody was very graceful. Everybody was very gracious to each other about helping, pitching in, and really streamlining those efforts. So because we were able to pull together and find that time to support each other across brands, we were able to grab 2 stories on the first page of Google when you're looking for coronavirus meetings and events, which was really exciting. The 4 stories put out altogether by Meetings Today drove over 32,000 page views, which was just a huge spike for us in traffic. But really, it's not about getting the traffic. While that's a great benefit for us, it's really about serving as that useful resource to our agencies and to our clients that we work with. From our meetings brand as well, we also helped with some planned messaging. And this is very important, as George mentioned earlier, having that plan in place about what you're going to do when a situation arises. So this organization, Visit Visalia, it's a convention and visitors bureau. They had this, really nice sales package message that was going to go out about how wonderful Visalia is and how you should go there and have your meeting in their venue. Just as they were about to pull the trigger, we all paused and said, you know what, this is a really lovely message, but it is super inappropriate right now when we're asking people to travel, to a location when you're not supposed to be doing that, says the CDC. And so we worked with the Visalia team. We were able to help them really craft a nice empathetic message that said, hey, you know what? Everybody is struggling. Let's do this together. We're going to keep moving forward. We're here for you. How can we help? And then very softly at the end, as a PS, it says, when you're ready to get back to work, give us a call, submit your RFP, we'll help you plan. It's more than just that sales message. It's really saying, let us help you. So now, they are positioned like we're working with our partners. We are Visalia's partner now. We're not just their ad agency anymore, and they are partnering with their constituents as well. Similar coverage on our building site. we had an originally published article from a couple of years ago that we deemed very relevant. Now, everybody's telling you wash your hands, make sure you're not touching your face. So we retooled this piece rather than starting from scratch. We just went back through, updated it with additional information, and then at the end also put in those editorial notes that says when it was updated. Now, this was really unique experience for us because when this was previously run, it was fairly popular. It got a couple hundred page views without having to do any advertising or anything on social. But we were able to, once again, rebroadcast this piece, including some additional signage that we updated to have individuals download it, print it out if they want to, hang it up in their workspaces before their professional services teams clear out. But also we had a unique opportunity to work in a piece from our agency side. So our very talented editor-in-chief, Janelle Penny, did a great podcast, a very short piece with GP Pro about hand sanitation and workplace hygiene, which we were able to slide into this piece and just put another layer of multimedia interest into that piece. This story actually got onto page 1 of Google for facility management and hand washing. It's a very specific search term, which I acknowledge, but it's something that people are looking for in our industry. 800 plus newsletter clicks and over 1,600 unplanned page views to the site, which is a huge increase, again, over half the site traffic average in just 2 weeks to this page. And again, just talked about this, the Georgia Pacific GP Pro podcast was really great. We were able to pull in as a featured image on page 1 of Google. All of this was organic. We didn't put any paid behind it. It was just very strategic touch points for our clients to show them, hey, we are savvy. We know how to get your information viewed in a way that is not salesy, that is very thought leadership, and perhaps be able to garner some additional conversations for them down the road. The average page time on this was 3 minutes, which I want to point out because we always include transcriptions with all of our podcasts. That way, if somebody isn't in a place to, or like me, doesn't necessarily like to listen to audio, they can read through that transcript. Okay, so just a quick update. I don't want this to be all about us. So this is what we were able to help achieve across our brands in a way that really connects our ad partners and our clients together with information that they need. This isn't about us getting sales. This is about us connecting, making those partnership connections, and really helping them to view us as a partner going forward. Over 34,700 additional page views on our publisher brands. We had over 9,000 clicks to read or listen from our e-newsletters, which was really exciting given all of the flurry of communication that was going out. And again, 16,000 shares from our brand sites, which is phenomenal. A lot of that was driven by Michael Dominguez's article, and just being able to work with him and have that opportunity to share out his message across our publication site was very exciting. Just a couple of examples for you outside of our B2B. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of healthcare partnerships. We do a lot of higher education partnerships as well. It's one of the cores of our business. So we were expecting to attend this NAGAP GEM conference, which was coming up here pretty quickly. We were going to sponsor that conference and send some of our designees there to work. Unfortunately, that conference was canceled. So we were able to, as a sponsor, have an opportunity to reach out to that attendee list just one time. And, because we want to be ethical and we want to be kind, we really wanted to put forth an opportunity for them to say, hey, you know what, you have worked really hard on this deck. You have worked really hard on your presentation. Let us give you some tools to get that message out to people that you really want to connect with at this trade show. So we put together what we've called our Rapid News Response Program. This is a package that does just what we just walked through. We offer team support for small, medium, large agencies, small, medium, and large organizations of any type to help put together crisis communication messaging, whether that's the actual blogs or the podcasts or information like that we just walked through, or if it's helping to float that agency's daily work, daily editing and writing needs, daily production needs, so that they themselves can focus on that crisis communication. We wanted to put it out there that we can help them get this messaging together, package it in a way outside of a PowerPoint that can be useful for people. So within 1 to 2 days, we were able to compile this package. It's something that we've been doing, but never necessarily formalized, and distribute it out via email to those prospective individuals who we were hoping to meet at the conference and just didn't get a chance to. So rather than turning it into an event of our own, we were just able to make those conversations happen. And again, because we work in industries that are highly impacted by all of these closures and all of these, conferences being shut down, a lot of our organizations that we work with are healthcare, academic medical centers, giant universities and hospitals that have had to literally just let all of their students out of the dorms, let them all go home, trying desperately to shuffle from in-person classes to online classes. It's a major disruption, which has been coming for a long time, but is really confronting our education partners and saying, now is the time, we're all digital now, this is what we have to do. So it's very stressful. All of our marketing and professional services contacts at those hospitals are doing just what we're doing right now, working in their kitchens. So we wanted to put together something really nice. Our editor-in-chief from our Meetings Today publication interviewed a relationship therapist, Megan Bierce, and talked to her about how constituents in any sort of industry can work from home and really balance their work-life situations and try to find some peace and serenity while getting their work done, but also cutting off and saying, now is the time when I should be commuting home, and now I'm going to spend time with my family and my children, my pets, whatever that may be. Again, we included that soft sell towards the end for our rapid news response. In case they're just feeling overwhelmed and need some help, they can always reach out to us. I would say also that our CEO, Peter Stamates, put a really lovely letter out on our website that was offering people to just call us to chat. We'll sit and have a cup of coffee with you over Skype. We want to be here and we want to serve as your partner. And to do that, we just all have to remember our own humanity as these crises are unfolding.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariah. That was excellent. And certainly Staymates has done a great job in adapting to these crazy times and what is going on in the industry. And, I'd like to ask you this same question, Mariah. How many of your sponsors, attendees, and speakers were able to stay with you as you postponed your events?
Sure. So the vast majority have stayed with us. We've been, especially on our meeting site, where so much of our work is in destinations and content surrounding, travel to this location and that location. The vast majority have stayed. We have been in touch with them daily. Our salespeople are on the phone all day long, talking to them about pausing their campaigns, rerouting them around certain pieces. So for example, our COVID-19 coverage, some of our advertisers were very hesitant to have their ads appear on those pages, which we fully understand. So we worked with them to either pause those campaigns or reroute them to other stories. Like I showed you on the Visalia example, we helped them maybe retool some of their messaging to be a little bit softer, a little less salesy in this time. A lot of our groups are also reaching out to us on a strategic level. So, people that would normally just call us up and say, we'd like to buy a full print ad, okay, talk to you next year, are now reaching out and saying, hey, how can we help navigate this kind of scary situation? We still have our full staff. We don't want to slow down our work, but how can we do that without being off-putting? So we've served as consultants on a lot of those questions. And then, on our other side of our business, where the impacts are more in the audience sector and less at the, that's really convoluted to say. So it's operational questions. So we have our leadership getting in there and talking operationally. We have those functionality questions about how are we switching from in-person to online classes. And then we have just massive website projects that were started when things were nice and rosy last year, and now we're in the full swing needing approvals. And our doctors that we're reaching out to, our university leaders, are just unavailable right now. So we're having to navigate via text message. We're having to make, phone calls and just be very gentle about prodding and not overwhelming our clients with work at this time. I hope that answers your question. It's just kind of very different from the publisher to the agency side, how that looks. But so far, everybody has stuck with us and been very loyal, and we're just hoping to serve as kind of a buoy during this troubling time for everyone.
Great, right. That really shows, Staymates has done a good job for so many years for their customers. And, when you do a good job over the years, even when these crises happens, that people stay with you, and that really does show a lot of good things about your company. And to Mariah and to all your team and all the people over at Staymates who have, done a really good job of adapting to this environment. And as we all know, content is still king for B2B media. And content marketing is really a great way to be able to attract those, those people, the readers in the industry. And also, it sounds like your advertisers and everyone has stayed with you and your sponsors. So that's terrific. So congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for Mariah for presenting. And next we have Paul Turboff, who is from Hanley Wood and has done a really good job over there of adapting to. So Paul, go ahead and put your presentation up. And thank you again, Mariah. Paul?
Yep. Okay. Hi, Kathy. So thanks for organizing. I think given the situation that we're currently in, it's important to stay connected, you know, as we're all learning how to navigate, you know, some of these challenges. So let me just pull up my presentation. Great. Okay. So again, good morning. As Kathy mentioned, I'm Paul Turboff, Executive Vice President at Hanley Wood. You know, like everyone, we have an events portfolio, and you know, every single day, almost every single hour, we're addressing new challenges that have come up regarding coronavirus. So I thought it'd be helpful today to talk to you about, you know, Hanley Wood, what we're doing, what are some of the solutions, and how to move forward. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Hanley Wood, we have 3 business platforms. Our market data and advisory group, so where we're actually aggregating and collecting market data for the housing industry, as well as a consulting business. So we have really deep penetration into our audience around home builders and developers. Of course, our legacy business is media and events. So we publish about a dozen or so fully integrated media brands across home building, the apartment industry, contractors, building material dealers, architects, et cetera. Obviously integrated across, you know, digital platforms and events. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about our events portfolio. And then we also have a full service marketing agency as well. So when looking at our events portfolio, we have about a dozen or so kind of traditional conferences, probably what most of you have. So these are B2B events, which align to specific brands and audiences that we serve. They vary in size from 150 attendees up to our biggest event, which is about 1,400 attendees per event. I'd mentioned that we have a data business. Our data products are Zonda and Metro Study, and we are selling that market data to our audience, to our home builders. And we do between 12 and 15 quarterly updates in, you know, some of the largest housing markets in the United States. It's primarily to support our data business. So these are data subscribers who are coming to meet with some of our leadership to learn, you know, what's happening in a market given the most up-to-date current information. And the reason I bring that up is because, as you'll quickly learn, we're evolving that business very quickly. And we also have a custom events business. So, you know, for the past few years, this has been a growing area for us, where we're hosting either larger single conferences for some of our advertisers and customers, as well as doing, you know, bigger, more complex multi-city tours. So obviously any event is being impacted now, and I'll talk a little bit about, you know, the impact with some of our custom events. And then, like many of you, we have a number of partnerships across the industry aligned with some major trade shows. Some of those are being impacted pretty severely. So I'd mentioned that we serve the commercial design community with Architect, and we're the official media partner of the American Institute of Architects. They have decided to postpone their trade show, which is taking place in May, which is a pretty significant decision for them. So that's, you know, impacting some of the activities that we have at that trade show. And then last but not least, I just wanted to mention to everybody, we used to be, I think, the 3rd or 4th largest trade show company in the United States. We owned and operated about a dozen major trade shows, some of them as large as, you know, 60,000 people. we sold that business 5 years ago, and certainly I'm a little thankful for it, because that would certainly create much more significant challenges if you're having a major trade show being impacted. So, the smaller conferences, I think, is something that we can certainly manage and handle over the next few months. So a quick recap on what's happened at Hanley Wood. We had 3 conferences. You can see the dates on my screen, end of February, first week in March, and the second week in March. At our Pro Sales 100 conference in Dallas, we were just starting to think about, how coronavirus was impacting the business. We were certainly being protective of our attendees and staff by making sure there's extra Purell, talking a little bit about hand washing and things like that. But the coronavirus really hadn't made the impact of where we are today at that point. Moving 1 week later to our Carbon Positive Conference. This is a brand new event that we launched in LA to about a little over 400 architects. Certainly that week, we were starting to feel a lot more pressure. We were taking some of the news very seriously, but we were able to execute the event. And then the third event that we had, our Multifamily Executive Summit, which was in Colorado, the second week of March, it was clear to us that we had a very significant challenge on our hands. So in fact, if things hit you hard when it's very close to home, the day that I was leaving that conference, there was a letter that was slid under the door of my hotel room from the hotel announcing that one of their employees had contracted coronavirus. So suddenly it felt very real and very close to home. So, I got back to our DC office and we started, planning for, the balance of the year. So 2 major decisions that we made. One, as I mentioned earlier, we have our data quarterly meetings. We have made the decision to move all of those events to webinars. They do not have a significant amount of revenue associated to them, so it wasn't something that we were, very anxious about in terms of the revenue implications, but more concerned about the safety of our customers and our staff. And frankly, they're half-day sessions, so we felt we could execute them pretty well through webinars. So that is taking place. In fact, we launched a webinar last week specific to coronavirus and its impact on the housing market. And our chief economist, Allie Wolf, led that webinar, and we had over 2,500 attendees. Those were primarily supplier customers, so mainly our building product manufacturers who were really anxious about what's going to happen in the market. And we're going to continue to do those webinars with, weekly updates. So we've got another one today, and I've heard we already have over 3,000 registered attendees for that one. So clearly people are very interested in information. So as content leaders, I would certainly encourage you to look at, what type of information can you deliver to your audiences, to your customers, to help them, navigate the virus. The other major action, which we just announced this week, is our Builder 100 conference. So this is our oldest, most established conference. It's been around for 35 years. It was to take place May 11th through the 13th. We have moved to November, and we think that was absolutely the right decision. We've started to communicate to sponsors and speakers and attendees. On the sponsorship side, we've gotten lots of positive feedback. They agree 100% that it was the right decision. So far, everyone is, we haven't heard any negative news of people having to cancel due to the change. We have one sponsor who's told us that there is a conflict, but they think they can navigate it. So we should be okay. Unfortunately, a lot of our speakers for this event are CEOs of publicly traded home building companies. So their schedules fill up, months, if not a year in advance. And we have seen a couple of our speakers being unable to join us in November, which we anticipated, and we're going to have to rework our program. That being said, I want to make one key point about programming. We don't want to be tone deaf. We don't want to be marketing conferences for the fall today. But we think that if we've got important information to share with the industry that's going to help them navigate, the next 6 months, we think that's, part of our responsibility. So we're working through messaging right now with our marketing communications team. And we're certainly, I know Mariah had mentioned empathy. We want to be very careful about, what that messaging is. So we're taking our time and thinking through it and making sure that it's correct. In terms of our custom events business, we are postponing several custom events. We had a larger event that's to take place in April. Working with the customer right now to find time for later in the year. I mentioned one of the tours that we do. We're pushing dates further back, but both customers in these two cases are committed to executing the events just later on in the year. And then finally, there's been a lot of contemplation about what we think will happen with our fall events. Having moved the Build 100 conference to the fall, we now have 4 of our largest events are occurring in 45 days from beginning of October through the middle of November. And if coronavirus is still impacting our business, that's obviously going to have some significant implications to, our revenue. So we're planning accordingly. We're trying to, one of the tips or advice that I can provide everyone is making sure you're managing expenses as closely as possible right now, because even if you feel like, in the next maybe 60 or 90 days, hopefully we'll be through the virus, we're not sure. And it's better to make changes today while you still have time than, getting caught off guard by having to make some significant changes, in the second half of the year. So for us, we think about our mitigation strategies, and these are just kind of 5 key areas. I'm sure there's some other things to consider, but I know George and Mariah both mentioned communication. This is absolutely critical, both internal and external communication. Hanley Wood is a pretty large matrix organization, so we've got sales and events team, we've got marketing, we've got editorial, we've got executive, leadership. Everybody's got to be on the same page with, what the message is to our audiences. So, if you haven't done it yet, please, pull your management team together, make sure that everyone's delivering the same messages, making sure those messages are being delivered across multi-platforms. And then, it's moving quickly. So a message that you may have developed today may be irrelevant tomorrow or next week. So keeping up-to-date, accurate communication is critical, as I said, for both internally with your staff, and then, of course, externally with your audiences, customers, speakers, et cetera. When we first started to address the coronavirus, number one, hands down from our CEO and everyone else throughout the organization, it was critical to protect our employees, our staff, our audience, and our customers. This is going to be a challenging time. I know there's going to be revenue implications that impact the businesses, but at the end of the day, we don't have a business unless we're taking care of our team and our audiences and our customers. So we really want to make sure that that was priority number one. Priority number two, of course, is then protecting the business. So how can we maintain revenue? What can we do to make sure that we're managing our expenses properly? Are all things that I'm sure everybody is doing it. So, but not all is, doom and gloom. I mean, we actually think that there's some pretty exciting opportunities for new ideas. So while some industries are being severely impacted, I guarantee you Amazon, Zoom, other industries are going to benefit from, the challenges that we face. So, how can we do that? And one of the things that we've thought a lot about is that as events, not just Hanley Wood events, but also industry events are being postponed or canceled, that's going to impact our customers' lead generation. So what kind of ideas can we do to address that immediately, and working in, all the new digital platforms that are out there and helping our customers generating leads. So there are opportunities, I think, given the challenges that we face. And then lastly, I mentioned this at the top of the presentation, is staying connected. We're all learning, we're all adjusting, and I think this webinar, making sure that you're communicating with your network on ideas is really important. If you're like me and like many others, if you're extroverted, sitting in your house for weeks on end, trying to run the business is not easy emotionally and mentally. And I think that will start to impact people as, the next few weeks progress. So really important to stay connected, and I think Mariah said it best with Peter, having some coffee chats or whatever it is, but making sure your staff, your employees, your customers are all connected and having an opportunity to communicate with one another. So I will leave it there, Kathy, and if there's any questions, happy to address them.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hanley Wood has done a great job of being able to adapt to the environment. And it sounds like you've retained the vast majority of your sponsors, speakers, and advertisers, correct?
Yeah, so, this is all new. So specific to the one major event, the Builder 100 conference that we're moving to November, so far we don't have any cancellations, so fingers crossed. This is brand new information, so we'll see what happens. We are seeing some cancellations around our media business. So I think that a lot of companies are concerned and nervous about the future. And we all know that unfortunately marketing dollars are usually the first to go. And we've started to see that to some extent. So we don't know how big of an impact it will be for really, the last 3 quarters, but we saw it even before coronavirus that brand advertising is challenged. And certainly the coronavirus isn't going to help. So we're anticipating losing some revenue as it relates to people saving money.
How are you addressing being able to make up that extra revenue that's being lost?
Yeah, so certainly lead generation, I mentioned that is something that we're looking at closely. So we fortunately have some businesses that are already in place. With architects, for example, we do a lot with continuing education, and those continuing education units do become leads. So we've reached out to many of our customers to start asking them about that, and the response has been great. So in fact, I had one customer who hasn't used that program for a few years, and she said your communication, your outreach is timely because we are talking about it as we speak. So I think a lot of companies are going to try to fill their lead funnels with the absence of events, now through maybe beginning of the summer, and we'll see how long it lasts. But if it does last, they're going to need leads. So that's one key area for us that we're really driving. And then, like many of you, we're exploring online platforms. How can we do this? We hope to be able to move forward in the fall with all of our face-to-face events, but we're also being realistic that if this does continue, beyond the summer, we're going to have to make some changes.
Right. Good. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Hanley Wood has done a great job of being able to adapt to these crazy times, and that's why we selected Paul Terboff, Mariah, and George Fox, because all 3 of those companies, Hanley Wood, Staymates, and Allured, are doing a great job in being able to adjust to some of the challenges that everyone is facing in the B2B media industry, which is why we did this webinar. So I encourage you to post on the app any questions that you have, and we'll ask those questions of the speakers and take as many questions as we have time for. So I want to start with the first question. How has the experience been with logistical partners? So we'll have, each of the speakers can answer that question.
Sure, Kathy, since I'm Still on the microphone here. It's been great. Frankly, the event that we moved from May to November, we've been working with a hotel that we've used many times over the years, and they were very accommodating. And that's one point I'd like to add is that if you are thinking about moving events, I would suggest doing it sooner rather than later. I know everyone's sort of waiting to see what happens, but all the events that are being canceled in March, April, now May, are going to be hopefully moved into the fall, and meeting space is going to be tight. So our vendor, that hotel in particular, was great, very accommodating, totally understood what we were doing, and supported us. So we were pleased with that.
That's great, and that shows to the great job you've done with your events over the years. Mariah, you want to take that question as well?
Absolutely. So in our experience, we've had the situations that I talked about prior. So switching more from the serving as an ad dealer, the serving as an email dealer, to really serving as a strategy partner for a lot of our B2B groups. From our agency side, we've had just nonstop requests for, rapid news response marketing. So we've had teams of our writers working almost around the clock. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's true. When you work with colleges and when you work with healthcare organizations that require that constant touch of contact, we've just, buckled down together. And because we care so much about our clients and our agency partners that we work with, we want to be more of a partner and less of a vendor. So we've just made ourselves as accessible as possible. And I'm sure that a lot of our team will require a little bit of downtime after the bulk of this blows over, and we're more than happy to allow that. As long as we can help keep their business afloat, it really keeps our business afloat on the downstream.
Great, Mariah. And, like I said, Stamos has done a great job of adapting. It's a challenge for everybody. Everybody's working crazy hours right now, and it's very difficult to be able to, deal with the intensity that has happened. But, all of your companies have done a good job with that. So that's great. George, you want to ask that question as well?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. We've moved the one event so far, and I have to say, again, I credit the AluRed team for the efforts and the conscientiousness that they all take from every aspect of our business, from managing every piece of it, as well as all of the operations, and then all of our supporting partners. We were able to make the changes both with the facility and also with the hotels, I would have to say, quite expeditiously. It was a very nice surprise that occurred. As we go forward, as everybody's been mentioning, Paul and Mariah, with regards to the summer events, what's going to happen there, because we're all kind of sitting, on the wire here trying to figure out what's going to happen next. That may become more challenging because there's going to be more congestion in those kinds of changes, and the facilities, their availability, and the hotels especially, are up against some huge challenges. So I think it's just been our mantra to try to work as as effectively with the empathy that you need to with your vendors. In many cases, we treat our vendors like we treat our customers, and so we try to work together to try to make these things happen. And as we've all been talking about, getting out in front of it well in advance and having a plan ready to go with clear communications, and making sure that everyone is in the loop on what is going to happen when we make that decisive decision to make the change. That's what makes everything much easier for everyone involved. So our process so far has been very good. But again, we did that in the early part of March. We'll see as we go forward what April, May, and June, if we do get into that, what changes and what challenges increase as we go forward.
Good.
Yeah, George, I was just going to add too, in dealing with moving dates, when we first approached the hotel, they came back to us with a couple of options. They included one in August. They included one election week, Thanksgiving week, and Christmas week. So just to underscore the limited availability, we ended up choosing election week. We'd done a conference once before, actually 12 years ago, 2008, during the Obama-McCain election year, and actually had a reception, and people got together and watched the election results coming in, and we sort of played it up a little bit. So we're anticipating doing something similar, and maybe adjusting programming. So, what happens depending on who wins the election, what happens to housing under Trump administration or Biden, Sanders, whoever the Democratic nominee is. So we're adjusting and being flexible for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Right. Yeah, we're all adjusting, being flexible. That's part of it. I'd encourage all of you to post questions on the social app. So our next question is, how does the 2,500 to 3,000 webinar results compare to the historic on-site attendance for quarterlies?
Yeah, so great question. So our quarterly meetings, they're by market. So we'll be in Houston, Denver, Southern California, DC, et cetera. We'll get anywhere between 75 and maybe 200 max for those events. So it's probably pretty similar or more, actually. So we're thrilled, actually. I don't think we've ever had webinars that were that large. So again, underscores that a lot of people are anxious, need information. So as content leaders, thought leaders, delivering this type of information is really, critical, I think.
Great. So Mariah, how are you? How is your attendance and at some of the webinars, compared to the historic attendance?
Sure. So we actually had a very well attended webinar the week that a lot of this information was breaking out. So about 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago. And again, that was during this content planning retreat that we had going on. So our editors were very gracious in attending. That week, our attendance was pretty close to normal. People weren't really sure what was going on. The last couple of weeks, we've actually backed off of some of our non-essential or non-client sponsored webinar pieces, just because people have been, not in their normal workspace. People have been, scattered and not sure what's going on. This week and next week, we're really focusing on putting out a lot of podcast content, a lot of that really structured how to, what next, okay, now that the smoke has started to clear, what is our next planning phase, articles and webinars of that sort. So we tried to get out there in front with more text-facing and audible listening materials instead of video, just because of that, thinking about all of our people that would be listening to it, commuting around and trying to figure out how to set up their workspaces and so forth. But I think it's really commendable, the groups that have pushed ahead and done that, because I think you're starting to see those results coming through now. And we're hoping that the groups that we're working with, they can use this time really as a planning phase to not necessarily rest on their laurels and see what's happening, but really push forward and say, okay, now that we know this is the new scope of what's coming ahead, we can get ourselves into a position where we can really plan and come out strong.
Right, good. So George, how are you being able to bring some of the people who have traditionally been in your company to be able to continue with the advertisers, the speakers, and the sponsors that are going to be able to attend some of the, do you do webinars, George?
We do quite successfully. We do a lot of education. The content team at Alured, again, I have to credit all of what they do and how they do it on a daily basis. They've been informing people of all of the activities that are going on with coronavirus in our business steadily now for the last several weeks, and just kind of continuing almost like a drip campaign, if you will, of news and facts and informations and things you should be aware of and things to be looking out for. We have not at this point yet looked at any virtual education webinar series just yet. It's certainly something in the backs of our minds, and certainly something that we're going to have to get quite a bit more serious about as we get into the next month or so, if things start to change and start to slide further back. in the summer with some of our events into the fall, because 2 of our events in the summer are strong CEU accredited education programs. So we will have to, obviously shift gears and get more involved in a webinar series to be able to support the educational needs of our constituents.
Great, great, good job. One more question for each of the speakers. How is everyone adopting, the C-suite, the editorial, the technology staff, the salespeople, how do they, adapt to selling sponsors? How does the editorial adapt to this huge load that is put on them now? And, what kinds of technology you're using to be able to adapt to that, and how the executives, create a strategy? I think you pretty much addressed that, but yeah, do each of you want to address that question?
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in. A lot of business media organizations, I feel like, are somewhat siloed given their specific publications. Excuse me. So up to about a couple of years ago, actually, StayMates organizations were very much, our interiors team has this team of writers, our meetings team has this team of writers, and nobody crosses, there's no corporate marketing. Well, we've really found that, or no inclusive corporate marketing rather, we've really found that pulling together as one structured team has increased our capacity in not only creating more pointed and more targeted pieces, but really reducing the writer's workload in a lot of ways, because we can create one piece that can then be tweaked as necessary, posted in one location, and shared out through our umbrellas of the corporate angle, as well as through each of the individual brands. So we've actually, I wouldn't say we've cut their work by a third, but across the 3 publications, we've drastically reduced the amount of effort that goes into those pieces. And then when situations like COVID-19 arise, we can rely on that model to band together to create very targeted pieces, get those messages out, and then rely on our editorial staff, not necessarily to generate something new, but to format that messaging in a way that their audience is expecting to get that information.
Great, great. Paul or George, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we're, certainly doing a year forecast right now across all the businesses. So across data, media, events, marketing services, just to get our arms around where we think we'll land for this year. Obviously, that's a very hard exercise, but, we're doing the best we can. I think everyone, we try to encourage, we had a team call yesterday, and really making sure people are staying positive. The analogy that I make, I've been with Hanley Wood for 27 years, so we lived through, the 9/11 situation. And even though those were different, there were some similarities there. And so making sure people are positive, they're mentally healthy, and just working through it, and we can address all their concerns. I did see there was a question on the chat from David regarding how do you negotiate with hotels when a lot of their staff is furloughed and they're obviously slammed. So I don't have a silver bullet here. The only thing that we kind of leverage were future years. So if it's a hotel that, we potentially would like to do more business with, try to wrap those 2 things together. But it is tough. They are busy. They've got a lot on their plates, and they're, doing the best they can. So it's tricky.
Yeah, good. So, another question that just came in, or, how are you getting the hotels to move your revenue from your canceled events to the new events?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to vary hotel by hotel. They, in moving the events, into the fall, they kind of have the upper hand, because I think the space is going to be tight. So negotiating with them is a little trickier. We do tend to try to partner with, similar brands so that we get a little bit of leverage. So as opposed to spreading our business across multiple hotel brands, we do try to stay with 1 or 2, so that corporately we've got a little bit more leverage. And, unfortunately, it's all negotiation. So, whatever leverage you can pull on your end, pull them. But, it is going to vary, case by case.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Mariah, you want to ask those questions? There have been several of how everybody adapts, and then how you deal with the hotels and get them to move your revenue forward to your new events.
Sure, sure. So right now, our sales team is focusing on helping our clients adapt their messaging and pause messaging as appropriate right now. Like I mentioned before, we haven't really lost a substantial amount of revenue. However, we can't guarantee that that won't happen, you know, as groups are working towards their goals and trying to figure things out. So right now, we are not necessarily working with groups to cancel and move things as much as we are working with them to help strategize. Okay, so what is their next step? Really serving in a consultative capacity. So I guess going forward, one of the things that we'll have to work with is definitely getting our arms around more of the legal implications. And with our own events, we've actually had great success with working with our partners who have advertised with us for a long time to really flex with us and help us move some of our events. We actually had one scheduled in Milwaukee, which was like a fam trip and a one-on-one networking event trip, which are pretty successful for us. We also have one coming up in Hawaii that's had to be moved as well. And so when we're looking at those things, we're talking with our audiences very closely. We're talking with the venues, and we're talking with all of the vendors associated with that, saying what works for you, what works for our audiences, and how can we make that work for us in a way that is fair to everybody financially and, you know, strategically, so that we're not stacking our events on top of other really important industry events that our groups want to go to.
Great, thank you, Mariah. George, you want to address those questions as well? So George has moved one of the events that he has to December, and I know that he's done that successfully as well. So we're out of time. If you have more questions, you're welcome to post them on the app. We'll just have one more question real quick, if you guys don't mind staying for a couple more minutes. If it seems that we could invoke the impossibility clause, but how do we do that with the hotels? So yeah, is that something that we can answer real quick?
Yeah, we've talked to our lawyer about force majeure and in all those, and fortunately, we've actually seen it now. So when we moved that event from May to November, there's now new language in the clause about pandemics and viruses and things like that. Again, I don't know the situation specific for you, but I think you have a rational case, especially if you're in a state which is severely impacted. So our event was in California. So I think we had some leverage to say, that the governor has obviously taken some pretty specific actions, and that the hotels will have to work with you on it. But, if you're in another state where they are not invoking some of those actions, it might be a little bit harder to do. But again, so far we haven't had to move too many events, but in the one we did, we had a good experience. So, we haven't run into that impossibility clause and how to work that.
That would be the same for us, Kathy. We haven't challenged yet. Paul's right. There is those opportunities that you can invoke if need be. You have the support from the state and the government. So it is definitely something to look at, but empathy and working with your vendors, no matter of what kind or size, is going to be critical through all of this. And as I mentioned before, planning ahead, postponing properly, and being decisive so that your vendors, as well as your customers and your staff, all understand what your agenda is and what you're all hopeful for in terms of the new dates that you set can be dates that we can commit to. Again, this is a groundswell situation that's occurring, and it's very difficult to know how long it's going to last and what its overall impacts and implications are going to be to all of these businesses, ours as well as everybody that's connected to us. So we're trying to be as supportive and as communicative as we possibly can through these times.
Great, thank you, George. So Mariah, do you want to address those questions? A lot of people are worried about moving their dates and dealing with the hotels, and how does the insurance cover that, and how do you deal with the impossibility and force majeure clause in your company at Staymates?
Sure. So we work with a lot of different types of organizations from all levels, all the way up from catering, all the way up to hotel and conference center operations, which all of you do. We have our own legal team that we work with, of course, just like any other agency on those questions. We can direct individuals to specific resources, but we don't necessarily dole out legal advice. We have been keeping a track, sort of like an FAQ sheet for our sales teams and for our operations teams to refer back to. So a lot of the groups are getting the same questions. A lot of the sales reps are getting the same questions over and over. So we've put together not necessarily canned verbiage by any means, but certainly talking points that they can use. So these are the resources that we know are reliable that you can turn to. These are the things that have worked with other groups that we work with. You can give this a try. Perhaps reach out to so-and-so in the industry. They're a known expert for this. So if we don't have that expertise in-house, or if we don't feel that it would be ethical or morally okay for us to give that sort of advice, we're absolutely making sure that we have resources on hand to dole out to and serve as that liaison to connect individuals with.
Great, great. Well, we're out of time. We really appreciate you know, all the speakers going a little bit over today. So if you have more questions, you can email them to me. My email is KSIMONSEN@mediagrowth.com, ksimonson@mediagrowth.com. And if you email them to me, I'd be happy to forward them to the speakers. I know that all the speakers are happy to answer questions. We're all in this together and we're all trying to figure this out. You can also post them on the social app, and I'll be able to forward them to our speakers. So thanks again to, for Paul, Mariah, and George. You all did an excellent job, and we really appreciate you taking the time here. We're all trying to build community, and we're all trying to figure out how to deal with these crazy times. So again, if you have more questions, email them to me or post them on the app. And, we can continue to network through the app and through email and phone calls. We're all trying to support each other. So again, thank you so much to the attendees and to Paul and Mariah and George. So we'll all work this out eventually. And it seems like, I know these Allied Staymates are doing a good job with that. And I'm sure a lot of you are doing a good job, and we're all doing the best we can. So we wish all of the B2B media success, and we will continue to build this community and to help everybody to adapt to the environment that is there. So thanks again to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for participating. We really appreciate it.